relationship between the statutes in the state of Utah and the administrative rules, the Code of Administrative Rules? I mean, is the Code of Administrative Rules that is promulgated and in place, does it have the effect of law?
Well, yes, to the extent that it does not conflict with the law. In other words, to the extent it's valid, yes, it does.
And I assume that you and other state employees within the AG's office acknowledge that you have an obligation to comply with those rules to the extent there's not a conflict, as you just said.
We do the very best we can.
When is the last time that you read the Code of Administrative Rules relating to outside employment and conflict of interest for state employees?
Yeah, Rick, I'm gonna go ahead and again, I'm gonna rule that out of order because.
Mr. Chair, this is, we just heard from the Attorney General about compensation for the individuals within the office. This relates directly to that. It relates to the money that the individuals within the office make or can make. I'm sorry, I don't mean to argue with you, but I think that there's a very direct connection here.
That's a valid point, because we did just have that conversation about with the auditor about opportunity and motive and justification. However, again, I feel that we're getting into campaigning issues. If there are problems happening in the AG's office with the AG, then whatever happens there, this work, the work of this office, the work that we fund, and that which we appropriate funds still needs to move forward, regardless of who is in that office. So while I appreciate the idea, I don't think that it is relevant to this appropriations meeting.
Well,
again, we do have the governor's office waiting to be heard.
let me just say this, Mr. Chair, with all due respect. I think that for individuals who are interested in this, and I direct the Attorney General's attention to this particular administrative rule, Rule 477-9-2, which deals with outside employment, and Rule 477-9-3, which deals with conflict of interest. Everybody on this committee, and most people who've been paying attention to current affairs, recognizes that there's been a lot of questions and scrutiny directed to the degree to which state employees supplement their income, as referenced by the Attorney General, by outside employment. It's a very common practice. I think that it's squarely within our committee's responsibility and obligation to, in determining what budget is appropriate for the Attorney General's office, and not just the AG's office, but for all state agencies, we look hard at what the rules require and say what restrictions are in place and what freedom exists on the part of state employees to earn outside income, and to the extent to which that relates to their ability and their willingness and their desire to discharge their duties as state employees. That's my point. I've referenced these references, I've made these references to those rule provisions. I think they have the effect of law. I have serious questions about the extent to which the AG's office, past and currently, is not in compliance with those rules, and I think that's squarely within the wheelhouse of what we're dealing with here on the committee. I think that we ought to be talking about that, and I recognize that time is limited. I'm not going to ask any more questions of this witness about that, but I encourage the members of the committee to take a hard look at those provisions. They're directly relevant to what we're doing.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. I think that is definitely something that should be looked at. My concern is simply we have one more meeting before we have to start making recommendations. Is that? And again, to me, these seem like policy discussions and policy decisions and not appropriation.